My girlfriend said, "I love you, but I'm not ready for the boring couple life. I want to feel young and wild before I settle down with someone safe like you." So I gave her all the freedom she wanted while I started a life she'd never be part of. What she did next? I need to tell you about the conversation that completely changed my perspective on relationships. My name is Ryan, I'm 33 years old, and I work as an insurance claims adjuster here in Charlotte, living in a decent apartment in Ballantyne with my girlfriend Jessica, who's 29 and works as a marketing assistant for a small agency downtown. We'd been together for about 2 years, living together for the past 8 months, and I really thought we were building something solid, you know, the kind of relationship where you start talking about bigger apartments, maybe getting a dog, discussing vacation destinations for next summer. But apparently, while I was mentally planning our future, Jessica was feeling like a caged bird, desperate to spread her wings before settling into what she saw as the inevitable boredom of committed adult life. It started with little comments that I initially dismissed as normal relationship frustrations, complaints about our routine, how we always watched Netflix on Friday nights instead of going out, how we'd become too comfortable and predictable. She'd scroll through Instagram, showing me photos of her single friends at clubs or on spontaneous weekend trips, sighing dramatically and saying things like, "I miss feeling alive," or, "When did we become so boring?" I'd suggest we could go dancing or take a weekend trip ourselves, but she'd wave off these ideas, saying it wasn't the same when you're already a couple because you can't really experience that electric feeling of meeting new people or having unexpected adventures. The complaints intensified over several weeks, becoming more pointed and frequent, until everything seemed to revolve around her feeling trapped by our domestic life. She'd get annoyed about grocery shopping together, irritated when I asked about her day, and started staying out later with coworkers from her marketing job, coming home with stories about flirting with strangers at bars and how refreshing it felt to be seen as an individual rather than half of a couple. Her sister Monica, who works as a nurse and has always been the practical voice in their family, tried to talk sense into her during one of their coffee dates, pointing out that grass is greener syndrome was natural but that throwing away a stable relationship for some fantasy of excitement was typically a mistake people regret. But Jessica accused Monica of being jealous because she'd been single for years and didn't understand what it felt like to commit to someone before experiencing everything life had to offer. The breaking point came on a Tuesday night in late March when I was reviewing some complex insurance fraud cases for work, analyzing medical claims and property damage reports to determine which ones warranted further investigation, when Jessica sat down across from me at our kitchen table with this serious expression that immediately made my stomach drop. "Ryan, we need to have an honest conversation about us," she said, and I closed my laptop because nothing good starts with that phrase, giving her my full attention while mentally preparing for whatever bomb she was about to drop. She took a deep breath and launched into what felt like a rehearsed speech about how much she loved me and valued our relationship, but how she was starting to feel like she'd never really lived her life as a single, independent woman, never had those wild stories her friends talked about, never experienced the thrill of uncertainty and possibility that comes with being free and available. "I love you, Ryan, and yes, I want our future together," she said, reaching across to squeeze my hand, "but I need to feel young and wild before I settle down with someone safe like you." The word safe hit me like a physical blow, and when I asked her to explain exactly what she meant by that, she told me I was exactly the kind of man she wanted to marry someday, stable, responsible, good with finances, the type of guy who would never disappear or cause drama or break her heart, but that she needed to experience what it felt like to date other types of men first, more exciting and unpredictable men, before she could really appreciate what I offered. "You're safe and stable, Ryan, exactly what I'll want when I'm ready to be serious and think about marriage and kids and mortgages and all those adult things," she explained with what she probably thought was a reassuring smile, "but right now I just need some time to get this out of my system." She talked about wanting to go on girls' trips without feeling guilty, wanting to dance with other men at clubs, wanting to feel that butterfly in your stomach excitement that she claimed had disappeared from our relationship because everything between us had become too predictable and comfortable. When I asked what this meant for us practically speaking, she suggested we take a break. Not a permanent breakup, she rushed to clarify, just some temporary space for her to explore and figure out who she was when she wasn't half of a couple, while knowing I'd be there when she was ready to get serious about building a real future together. "Just give me time to get this out of my system," she said, squeezing my hand tighter, "and then we can build something real and lasting, something I'll truly appreciate because I'll know what else is out there." I sat there looking at this woman I'd been mentally shopping for engagement rings for, this woman I'd been considering adding to my work health insurance policy, and I realized she saw me not as a partner but as a retirement plan, something solid and boring to rely on after she'd had her fun with more exciting options. Here's where I surprised everyone, including myself, with my response. The next morning, after Jessica had packed a bag and gone to stay with her sister Monica for a few days while we figured things out, I sat at that same kitchen table with my coffee and really thought about what she'd said, not the part about me being safe and boring, but the part about needing to get something out of her system before she could appreciate what we had. And you know what hit me like lightning? I had things to get out of my system too, dreams and experiences I'd been putting off because I thought building a life with someone meant storing your individual ambitions in the back closet until retirement. So when Jessica texted me that afternoon asking if we could establish some ground rules for our break, probably expecting me to negotiate terms about how long I'd wait and what kind of contact we'd maintain, I simply responded, "Take all the time you need, and I'll do the same." She probably thought I meant I'd spend the time working on myself to become the exciting boyfriend she wanted, maybe take some cooking classes or learn guitar to impress her when she came back, but that wasn't my plan at all. You see, working in insurance claims teaches you about risk assessment and worst-case scenarios, and analyzing my situation like I would any complex claim, I realized that waiting for someone to decide I was worth their time was the highest risk investment I could make. Within a week, I'd done something that probably sounds strange but made perfect sense to me. I joined a support group for divorced people that met Tuesday nights at a community center in Uptown Charlotte, not because I was divorced, but because I figured these people had experience rebuilding their lives after relationships ended, and I needed that perspective more than I needed couples therapy or relationship advice. The group was led by this guy David, 35, a divorced dad who worked in business consulting and had this calm, direct way of talking about life after major disappointments that really resonated with me. "The biggest mistake I made after my divorce," David told the group during my second session, "was sitting around waiting for my life to start again, instead of realizing it had already started the moment she left." That statement hit me like a revelation, because I understood that Jessica leaving, even temporarily, was really the beginning of something new, not a pause in something old. David introduced me to rock climbing, something I'd always been curious about but never pursued because Jessica thought it was too dangerous and worried about the insurance implications if I got hurt, which I'd always accepted because, yeah, I work in claims and know exactly how much medical bills can cost. But now, strapping on climbing gear at an indoor facility in Pineville, feeling my muscles burn as I worked my way up artificial rock faces, I felt more alive than I had in months. Not because I was trying to become someone else to win her back, but because I was finally doing things I actually wanted to do. I also signed up for salsa classes, which was partially ironic since she'd always complained that we never danced, but mainly because I genuinely wanted to learn for years and had been too self-conscious to suggest it when we were together. The instructor, a woman named Maria who taught at a studio near South End, paired me with different partners each week, and I discovered I actually had rhythm and that dancing with someone new each class was exciting in a way that had nothing to do with romantic interest and everything to do with pure joy of movement and music. Meanwhile, Jessica was posting Instagram stories from clubs in Noda and the Music Factory, always with the same group of single friends and always featuring this personal trainer named Brad who worked at her gym and seemed to be the physical embodiment of everything she thought was missing from our relationship: spontaneous, confident, the kind of guy who suggested midnight trips to Asheville or weekend getaways to Myrtle Beach without worrying about budgets or vacation days. Her posts had this forced quality, like she was trying to convince herself as much as her followers that she was living her best life. Lots of selfies laughing too hard and captions about living in the moment that felt desperate rather than genuine. But here's what really threw her off. According to Monica, who started calling me occasionally to check how I was doing, my social media was showing a completely different version of the story she'd expected. Instead of sad Ryan sitting at home with takeout containers waiting for her to come back, my Instagram showed climbing adventures with my new friends from the support group, salsa dancing videos where I was clearly having a blast, hiking trips to the Blue Ridge Mountains on weekends when she assumed I'd be home missing her. She keeps asking me why you seem so happy without her, Monica told me during one of our conversations, and honestly, Ryan, I think she expected you to be more devastated by this. But the truth was I wasn't devastated, I was liberated. Here's where reality started hitting her like a freight train. About 6 weeks into Jessica's wild phase, the glamorous single life she'd been chasing started losing its shine faster than cheap jewelry. Brad, the personal trainer she'd been featuring in all her Instagram stories, turned out to be exactly what you'd expect from a guy who spends his days flexing in front of mirrors and hitting on women at the gym. Charming for about 2 dates, but ultimately only interested in hookups and had zero interest in anything resembling emotional connection or genuine conversation. When Jessica tried to introduce some depth to their interactions, suggesting they go to a museum or have dinner somewhere that didn't involve loud music and expensive cocktails, Brad either changed the subject or straight up told her she was overthinking things, and they should just keep it fun and casual. Her party friends, who had seemed so exciting and spontaneous when she was looking at them from outside a committed relationship, turned out to be exhausting in their relentless pursuit of the next club, the next event, the next Instagram-worthy moment, always chasing some external validation instead of finding genuine satisfaction in their lives. These women, mostly mid to late 20s, seemed stuck in a perpetual state of manufactured excitement, constantly planning elaborate nights out that inevitably ended with someone crying in a bathroom, starting drama over nothing, or spending money they didn't have on clothes they'd wear once for photos. Jessica found herself missing the simple pleasure of a quiet night at home, missing having someone who actually cared about her day-to-day experiences instead of just wanting her as a wingwoman for their latest romantic conquest. The novelty of random men buying her drinks and trying to impress her with terrible pickup lines had worn thin quickly, especially when she realized most of these interactions were hollow and forgettable, lacking any real substance or potential for meaningful connection. So naturally, she started reaching out to me, testing the waters with casual texts that began innocently enough, asking how I was doing, mentioning something funny that reminded her of an inside joke we shared, sending photos of places we'd visited together with captions like, "Remember when we came here?" But here's what she didn't expect. I was genuinely busy, not sitting around waiting for her messages like some loyal dog hoping for scraps of attention. When she texted me on a Friday night asking if I wanted to grab coffee and catch up, I was actually packing gear for a weekend climbing trip to Grandfather Mountain with my new group of friends from the support sessions and the climbing gym. When she suggested we could watch our old favorite show together sometime, I was at salsa practice preparing for a social dance event that Maria had invited all her students to. When she called me on a Tuesday night around 10, probably expecting to find me home alone and available to listen to her relationship problems with Brad, I was out with David and several other guys from the group, having dinner and discussing our plans for a hiking trip through the Smokies we'd been organizing for months. "You sound different," she said during one of our phone conversations, and I could hear confusion and something that might have been panic in her voice, like, happier. "Are you seeing someone?" The question caught me off guard because honestly, I had been on a few casual dates, nothing serious, just coffee or dinner with women I'd met through my new social circles, but it wasn't about replacing her or proving a point. It was about discovering who I was when I wasn't constantly managing someone else's emotional needs and insecurities. "I'm just living my life, Jessica," I told her, and the simplicity of that statement seemed to throw her completely off balance because apparently she'd expected me to be in some kind of suspended animation, waiting for her to finish sowing her wild oats and come back to reclaim her place as the center of my universe. "But what about us?" she asked, and I could practically hear her mental gears grinding as she tried to process the fact that I hadn't been sitting like a faithful golden retriever, keeping our apartment exactly as she'd left it, staying available for when she decided she was ready to settle down with her safe option. The conversations became more frequent and more desperate as she realized that the life she'd walked away from, the stability, the genuine partnership, the comfort of being truly known and valued by someone, wasn't something she could just pause and pick up again when convenient. She'd expected me to remain static while she explored dynamic experiences, but instead discovered I'd become the dynamic one while her exploration had left her feeling empty and disconnected from anything meaningful. Fast forward 6 months and here's where everything came full circle. Jessica called me on a Thursday night in September, her voice carrying that familiar tone of someone who's made a decision and expects the world to accommodate it, asking if we could meet for dinner because she had something important to discuss with me. I agreed to meet her at a small restaurant in Plaza Midwood, partly out of curiosity and partly because I'd genuinely gotten past any anger or resentment and could approach the conversation from a place of genuine calm. When she walked in, I immediately noticed how different she looked. Not physically, but in her energy, her confidence, the way she carried herself. The wild, adventurous woman who'd left me 6 months earlier to explore her options had been replaced by someone who looked tired, uncertain, maybe even a little defeated. We ordered our food and made small talk for a few minutes, but I could see she was gearing up for something, the way she kept playing with her napkin and looking around the restaurant like she was searching for the right words written on the walls. Finally, she took a deep breath and launched into what was clearly another rehearsed speech, this time about how much she'd learned about herself during our time apart, how valuable the experience had been for her personal growth, but how she'd come to realize that what we had together was rare and special and worth fighting for. "I'm ready now, Ryan," she said, reaching across the table to touch my hand, ready to be serious, ready to build the future we talked about. I got all that wild stuff out of my system, and now I can truly appreciate what you offer. The irony wasn't lost on me that she was essentially asking me to be grateful that she'd decided I was worthy of her attention now that she'd confirmed there wasn't anything better available. She talked about how exhausting it had been to be constantly on with people who didn't really know her, how superficial most of her interactions had become, how much she missed having someone who understood her moods and her humor and her quirks without needing constant explanation. "You were right to wait," she said with a smile that probably would have worked 6 months ago, "and now we can pick up where we left off, but better, because I know what I want now." I listened to her entire presentation without interrupting, watching this woman who had once been the center of my universe trying to reclaim a position that no longer existed, and when she finished talking, I was quiet for a long moment, not because I was considering her offer, but because I was marveling at how completely different I felt sitting across from her. "Jessica," I said finally, "I think there's been a misunderstanding. I wasn't waiting for you." The confusion that crossed her face was almost comical, like I'd told her gravity had stopped working or that Tuesday had been cancelled. "What do you mean you weren't waiting for me? We agreed to take a break so I could figure things out, and now I have." I explained as gently as I could that a break had meant exactly that to me. A break, not a pause, not a timeout where I'd sit on the bench while she played in the game. I told her about David and the support group, about the climbing and salsa dancing, about the friends I'd made and the confidence I'd gained, about the women I'd dated and the one I was seeing seriously now, a financial advisor named Nicole who appreciated me exactly as I was right now, not as someone to settle for after exhausting better options. "But I chose you," Jessica said, and I could hear desperation creeping into her voice as she realized her careful plan of having her cake and eating it too was falling apart in real time. "I could have stayed with Brad or any of those other guys, but I chose to come back to you." That's when I understood she still didn't get it, still saw our relationship as something she could put in storage and retrieve when convenient, still thought of me as her insurance policy rather than a person with my own agency and choices. "You didn't choose me 6 months ago," I said, keeping my voice calm but firm. "You chose to explore your options while keeping me as a backup plan. And that taught me something important about the difference between being someone's security blanket and being genuinely wanted." I explained that I'd learned to value myself enough to want someone who would choose me first, not someone who would choose me after confirming there wasn't anything better available. The woman sitting across from me wasn't the same person I'd fallen in love with 2 years ago, but then again, neither was I. I'd become someone who understood that real love doesn't involve being treated like a retirement plan, someone who deserved to be with a person who valued what we had in the present moment instead of seeing it as something to settle for in the future. When we left the restaurant that night, Jessica looked stunned, like someone who'd expected to walk into a familiar room and found it completely remodeled. She'd gambled our relationship on the assumption that I'd always be there waiting, and lost everything when she discovered I'd used our time apart to become someone who would never accept being anyone's second choice ever again.